All right, Flight Sim community, welcome back. This is Beetle Beast, and here we are on Flight Sim 2024, standing outside the Flysimware Learjet 35A. This is an airplane that I've actually had a lot of interest in for quite a while, but I never got around to purchasing it in Flight Sim 2020. After my previous Proline 21 video that I posted most recently, a commenter asked if I had tried this because they were curious as to my thoughts on the airplane. And I hadn't tried the Lear 35A, but that gave me kind of the extra nudge that I needed to go out there and make the purchase. And thus far, I can say I haven't been disappointed. Now, if I want to be disappointed in something, it's my ability to make a YouTube video, because I have attempted to make this video, 5 or 6 times. And each time I do it, something gets messed up. And unfortunately, I don't dub over my audio, so you're getting everything I say in real time. That's why sometimes I have mistakes in my videos. And I don't have a problem with that. It's just a hope, I guess you could say, to minimize the number of errors and mistakes that I say if I'm just kind of speaking off the cuff, because that's essentially what you're getting here. You're getting a conversation of me talking to myself about an airplane that I'm hopefully conveying to you what I think of it. So we're going to take all of that and just say, hey, this is probably going to have some errors in it, but I'm going to do my best to speak honestly about what I know and hopefully not BS too much about stuff I don't know. So with that said, let's talk about this airplane. Right now, we're on the ground. We're actually in St. Joseph, Missouri. And from St. Joseph, we're going to do a little flight from St. Joseph, a little town that's north of Kansas City. We're going to go down to Kansas City, actually, and land there at Kansas City Downtown Airport. I'm not going to go too in detail about the systems. This airplane's been out there for a while. Like I said, it was created for Flight Sim 2020. It's really well reviewed in the marketplace right now. I think I saw that it has 4.5 stars out of 5 inside of Flight Sim 2024, but I assume that has the Flight Sim 2020 rankings in it as well. But it is well reviewed. It's well received, I guess, by the community, which is a little different than that Challenger 350 that I had reviewed previously. I've always had a soft spot for Learjets. The Learjet 60 was the first business jet type rating I ever earned, and I absolutely had a blast flying it. It was an amazing airplane, but one that you had to really respect because it had a thrust-to-weight ratio that was unlike anything I had ever seen, and a wing that was fairly high loading. It was a very small, short wing with a relatively large fuselage on it for a mid-sized jet, obviously, and a small mid-sized jet at that. But the Learjets, typically speaking, have a reputation for being overpowered and just exceptionally fun to fly. Very pilot-friendly airplane. But you have to respect them because they will kill you. They'll kill you in a heartbeat. But that said, they also make one of the most exciting airplanes you will ever get to fly if you're not flying fighters somewhere. So let's talk about this a little bit. Like I said, I've had this airplane now for about a week. I think I've flown it for about 11 hours, just enough time to kind of get comfortable. As I said, I've tried to make this video before, so probably, oh gosh, I don't know, 4 of those hours were while I was attempting to make this video, maybe 3 hours. And yeah, and every time the videos typically went well, but there would be an issue with my audio, or there'd be an issue with the resolution, or there'd be an issue with the airport that I chose to leave from, or something else gets messed up, or even the sound got messed up once. So that's just the life we live in, and I didn't feel like going back through and then dubbing over something again with my own voice and then losing out on sounds in the background, etc. I'm going to try to keep this quick and short, so I'll be sorry. My apologies already for probably talking a bit too much. So if we look around the exterior of the Lear here, it's really well modeled. The airplane comes with 8 different liveries, and of those, this one here is probably one of the more plain Jane versions, which is dressed up just as a standard business jet. There are some that are a little bit more outlandish. I like the one that is, I think it's Wards Express. It's got a combo of red and white with some nose art on the tail of the airplane, or I guess you could call it tail art. But it's a really good looking model. I just swapped to this one for today because I thought, what the heck, let's do one that looks more like a business jet. So that's what we're in right now. There's actually also multiple variants. I believe there might be a freighter version. I know for a fact that there's a air medical version of the airplane. The only one that I bought was the regular cabin configuration, passenger cabin. And that's mostly because I don't really care a whole lot about having different looks in the back. I don't spend much time in the back of the airplane. We'll do a little bit of it here just for the video, but me personally, it's not my cup of tea. What I do want to point out are some of the details here. So we're going to go forward into an area that we, technically speaking, wouldn't be able to get into. But it was a amount of detailing that I was really impressed with. The fact that they took the time, and I will say the rivets show up down here, even though the gear doors are open. That's kind of annoying, but it's once again, the fact that you see that is only because we can go inside of the airframe a little bit. But the amount of wear and tear that they actually put inside of this wheel well is impressive. They did the exact same thing on the main landing gear, and it all equally looks good. And additionally, I like the fact they have a part number here and a serial number that they added to this actuator, this hydraulic actuator. So I think that's pretty cool. Now, granted, I would also say that from a business jet perspective, that would be a very dirty looking wheel well, but these are not new airplanes either. The texturing is actually really good. I'm going to come up a little closer to the airplane so you can see. But if you can tell here, you can see the rivets along the fuselage, and they are, of course, flush mounted. So it makes the skin of the airplane look really kind of proper. I will say, I think this one here might be kind of incorrectly done with this line of rivets showing up along the emergency exit door, as I don't think that set of rivets should have been there. But all in all, I think the rivets actually look pretty good. I did notice just now on this particular model, there's a shadow being cast. It looks like from this windowsill. And that most likely would have been flush and wouldn't have been able to cast a shadow. I mean, that's really kind of nitpicky. But if you zoom back, if we get back from the airplane, you can tell there's actually some cool variation here, the little ripples along the side of the airplane. And that is very common amongst aluminum airplanes. That's just kind of what they look like. So I think this looks really pretty good. I love the reflectivity of the brightwork. The chrome here along the front edge of the engine, along with the leading edge for the hot wing. All of that looks phenomenal. The reflections inside of the paint itself look really good. You don't notice it as much on the white airplane as you do on the red for the Wards Express, but these still look really, really, really good. You can also see, and I'll talk about it again, or as I talked about earlier, inside the wheel well here, you see they added some corrosion. Once again, that'd be a concern for me, but it's there, along with just some wear and tear inside the wheel well. Once again, something that you would never see unless you're accidentally walking into a wing. But I was really impressed when I did. So, yeah, all of those things said, I think it's, like I said, I think it's a phenomenal looking airplane from the outside. And, they went to a lot of detail to make sure that you had some wear and tear, as well as just some, the general look and feel of an old high-performance business jet. It looks pretty cool. So we'll go ahead, we'll hop into the cockpit, and actually we'll hop into the cabin. We'll start our way at the back, work our way towards the front, and that'll be the next part. All right, so here we are. We're in the back of the Lear 35A. It's an 8-passenger configuration. Once again, I don't spend any time back here. I only did this in order to check it out for you guys, but you can come to the back of the airplane. The window shades are interactive. You can open them up. Comment that I'll tell you, though, the sound for them is very, very noisy. It's very loud. I do have game volumes turned down for the recording. And I always do that just because if you don't, you can't hear me talk either. So the game volumes are actually lowered. They're incredibly loud. And I've got headphones on right now. So to my ears, they're insanely loud. Tray tables open up as well. I think the amount of noise that they gave to them is probably a little excessive, but once again, they do work. So you have a 3-seat divan in the back, 2 rear-facing club seats there. And then we've got a forward club and then 1 side-facing seat. Now, what I will tell you about these Learjets is they're incredibly small. This little aisle that you can walk through, you would basically, well, you can't walk through. I'm sorry, I take that back. You can kind of crawl through. But you'd think that you'd have a person sitting here with a set of legs coming off the side, and that's literally what you would have in that position. I'll turn some people on back here in a second, right before we get going, just so you can see that. What we will talk about here next, though, is this door. So you're able to open it up. And then for the bottom, unlatch it, and then you release it here on the side. And in the real Learjets, this little piano string that goes down through the door and up the other side is then also connected with a retraction mechanism, a spring mechanism on the middle, so that when you would pull this forward, the entire door would come up, and then that spring would allow that piano cable to recoil inside of the door itself. So you close it by using the bottom one first. It'll automatically latch. The top one, you would actually close. You just touch it in order to make it close here, but in real life, you actually have to move the over center lock out of the way, and then you very carefully lowered it down because you didn't want to lose your fingers. Use that button to pull it in tight. Latched. Then release the button. On the side of this forward panel, you also have the light controller. It does control cabin lights. I do believe they are not set up to be able to work on ground power, but the door lights do work. Let's see here if I zoom in a little bit. It's a dim function baggage light, which is in the very back. This does not have external baggage, only the cabin bag. So your baggage compartment is actually right back here behind that rear divan. But yeah, the step lights right there. Like I said, cabin lights. You click the button, they won't work. There are overhead lights though, and I'm almost 100% certain they should work while you're in flight. So yeah, that's kind of that. Let me put some people back here for you, and we'll take a look at that, and then we'll work our way into the cockpit. So here's our very concerning looking passengers, but you can get an idea as to exactly what, like I said, how small the Learjets are. They were an airplane that you literally would get into, especially these early ones. So you sat down and you always felt as if your head was about to touch the side panel or your head was about to touch the roof. And like I said, there was not room to maneuver yourself along the seats. Obviously, you have a picture. You can see the two kids sitting here in the back, and that's about all you could fit in the back of one of these things. So, yeah, it's a very tight. I wonder what the heck he's laughing at. It's a very tight place to be, but it's kind of cool that they even included some passengers. You can put them on. They're all kind of creepy to me. It's like flying around with a bunch of corpses. I don't like it, so won't do that very much. But that is where they're at, and let's talk a little bit about how we kind of control them, along with some other stuff here. All right, so here we are. We're in the cockpit of the Lear 35, and what I will say immediately, of course, is that the cockpit feels incredibly kind of refreshing. It's very nostalgic. The Lear 60 and the Lear 35 have a very similar cockpit feel, design, all the way down to the annunciator panels being here. But the real differences there were the Learjet 60 had a Proline 4 avionics suite as opposed to the standard six-pack avionics that you have here. But all things said, let's kind of just work through a little bit of it. And we're going to go ahead and get this thing started up here in a minute. As I talked about earlier, on the left-hand side of the cockpit, you have the iPad. It's brought up by clicking on the window mount right here, and then clicking the power button to actually bring it up. It's what we used, of course, to put the people in the back of the airplane. It also has a lot of functionality in terms of equipment that you can put on or off, the stuff that we already saw in the back of the airplane, along with all the covers, etc., for the front. We're going to be using the GPU here in just a minute, but I'm going to turn it on a little bit later. The headset filter we'll talk about as we go a little bit further in flight, as long as I remember. But what it does is it makes it seem as if you actually have a headset on. There's two ways to do it. You can turn it on right here, or you can turn it on down here on your seat by clicking the headset. The only reason I may not do it would be so that you guys can hear the different sounds and the sound effects that are inside of the cockpit, because as I said earlier, I do record this at a lower volume so that you can actually still hear my voice and not simply be drowned out and you guys are fighting to hear both me and the airplane, etc. Weather, of course, shows up here. This will show you what the winds are currently doing. Moving over, there's where the people are. Fuel loading, you can change how much fuel you have in each station. And the most important thing that I like quite a bit here, I don't tend to use it very often, but if you're interested in trying to add realism to the simulator, this is key. This is killer, and it's great. It should be included on every airplane that's out there. The text font looks identical to what I had in a paper checklist for the Learjet 60 that I was flying. So I have to imagine that it's accurate. What I do know is as I've clicked through the systems that are on there, um, they are representative of the airplane. So I do believe that someone actually took the time to copy at least the pertinent information and ensure that it was included in here. The only reason we're not going to use it today is because it will take me extra time as I have to read over one thing, click on it, read something else, click on it, etc. There are certain things, of course, that you can't do. One of them being right here, number 2, circuit breakers check in. Unfortunately, they didn't model the circuit breakers. Now, I get it, and I'll talk about that here in just a second too. But you can't actually check that they're actually in because they don't actually pop out. Now, if I was to say any type of complaint that I have for the cockpit of the airplane here, it's right in front of us. You saw it when I was looking down here at the headset, but it's the seat texturing. While I know exactly what they were trying to do, and honestly, I think the Challenger 350 did it worse, kind of. The Challenger 350 made a terrible set of textures on their seat. This one here didn't do that. Sorry, they used a terrible, it wasn't so much a texture, but the mapping, the displacement mapping that showed up on the seat was really kind of crude and very thick, and it just didn't make it look like they were individual fibers or hairs. And I know that you, in order to model that, you will take up an entirely large amount of space or something that you'll never really look at. So I get it. This one here went the opposite direction, and instead they made it a very flat surface with a simple texture added to it. A mapping texture, not a mapping texture, but actually just a texture showing up here like an image. In that, I'm also not a huge fan of. I think the floors, while they are flat as well, they do a good job just because they're far enough away that you can't see them in the same level that you can here. But like I said, the seat I think could be a little bit better done, or done a little bit better. The circuit breakers are another thing, and like I said, I'm not going to actually complain about that because the thing is, in order to actually model the circuit breaker function, yes, if I was to disconnect, say, the primary yaw dampener or the AFC roll control or the cabin high altitude, pull the circuit breaker, I won't have the alerter going off. That'll be great, right? But there are also subsystems that get affected by having one circuit breaker pulled. So unless you want to take the time and actually model every system and subsystem and to model them all accurately, I completely understand them not doing it. However, I know that in Flight Sim 2024, and once again, this was created for Flight Sim 2020, a lot of the aircraft that came in 2024, at least the ones that I've flown in here, do have the circuit breakers modeled, at least in some rudimentary fashion. So I will say that, yeah, I'm kind of torn on that. It'd be great if they worked. I understand why they don't, and I'm not really upset about it because if you really wanted to get a study level sim, yes, they'd all have to work, and I would hope that this thing costs more than $30 if that was the case. It's simply a ton of work. So let's go ahead. I'm going to hide the checklist as I don't believe there's anything else. Oh, no, we do want it for one thing. I do want to use it to turn on that GPU, which is over here. I do want to use it for that. We'll do that in just a couple minutes after we start working through the start process. So one of the cooler things that they did here, and it has to do with the layout of the Learjet cockpit, the center console, the center pedestal is kind of sparse. You have your trim positions here, your trim actuators and engagement points here, except for you can also do it on the yoke, of course, for roll and pitch, but rudder's all down here. A couple of standby radios. This is your COM2, NAV2, and then your 2 ADFs, along with your yaw dampener here, and your fuel panel, which is a very small, kind of funny looking fuel panel, but that's what it is. We'll talk about that in a minute too. But there's a very limited center pedestal. There's also no overhead console inside of the Lear. So where are all your switches? Well, they're right there at the bottom of the glare shield. They're at the bottom of the instrument panel down here. But the problem is, of course, inside of Flight Sim, in order to see them, you have to move the yoke. Well, Flight Sim was smart, of course, and on every airplane, they have the opportunity for you to hide the yoke. And it's normally done right down here at the bottom, and that does work right there, just like that. For the right side, though, hitting the bottom sometimes might be a little bit more difficult. So they have this little panel here that works also. It also works on the left, just a little bit more difficult to touch on the left-hand side than it is on the right. Now, that said, they understood that you having to look down here and then try to find either that panel or that panel, and I guess you could look kind of to about there and maybe still hit the panel, But if you were looking at your instruments or if you were zoomed in at your instruments and you don't want to take that gaze away, you do have this right here, the little yellow pin that's up on the glare shield. If you were to click that, it hides it. I think it's genius. I love it. It's my favorite feature, I think, on this thing. And that's because you have to hit it. I guess apparently you can even hit the blue pin, but the yellow one's the one that lights up. So I think that's where you're supposed to hit. Either way, I love it. I think it's a fantastic feature in the airplane. It works for both sides. Only hides the left side there. If I was to look to the right slightly, I could then hide the right side. And that obviously works if you're trying to fly the airplane from the right seat as opposed to the left. So that works out really cool. I love it. We're going to go ahead. We'll show them for, actually, we won't show them for now. We'll turn them on in a second after we run through some of the checks. Okay. So let's get this thing started. We're going to zoom in a little bit so you can see a little bit better. And we're going to start right here. Battery 2 is going to come on. And when it does, we check over here. We see DC volts. It shows 24 volts on battery 2. Actually, it's probably about 25 volts, maybe almost 26. But it's a 24-volt electrical system. You're showing 24 volts. Let's check the voltage on battery 1. So we're going to turn battery 1 on, battery 2 off, and we see the exact same volts. Note that there's only 1 volt indication. There aren't 2 in this airplane, so you're going to only see it 1 time. So the only way you'll know what's working and what's not is to actually kind of troubleshoot the system and see what's there. All right, now we don't want to start this thing on the battery, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to turn on the GPU. So we're coming over here to the left, button pressed. GPU is on. I can hear it outside, and you can even see it right there. This beautiful Hobart GPU ground power unit. So it's on. If we zoom in really close, it looks like you even see voltage. I don't think that actually changes. I'm pretty sure it's just the decal that they used, but it's there. And this thing looks almost identical to every GPU that you've ever seen at a small airport. Great design. I hope they don't get sued, and hopefully they pulled licensing for Hobart so they could use that. All right. So that said, we've got battery power on. If you look inside here, you can see now we're showing 28 volts, which is the GPU power coming in. It's charging up those batteries. And let's get this thing started. So I'm going to turn on our beacon. Nav lights are going to come on. Thrust servo is going to come out of cutoff and up to idle. And we'll start with the right side. Push it down to the start position, and you get this little start light here, and ignition comes on. You can hear those clickers. Those are for these little tickers here as they work their way up on these analog engine instruments. So this is your N2 speed. This is going to be your turbine temperature. You see it increasing now. We have light off. And this is N1. This is fan speed. Normally on most modern aircraft, those are actually reversed. You have fan speed, then you have N2 speed, and then you're showing your turbine temps, or your ITT, inlet turbine temperature. Yeah, why they did it that way, I don't know. It's a little bit backwards in the way you're going to normally see it, but it does work. It's going to be perfectly fine. So you have turbine, fan, and then temp. Now, the turbine speed here is going to keep going. We should watch. Yep, our ignition already cut off. Starter shows off. And it is stabilized. And I was going to tell you, it stabilizes at about 30%. Now, what you'll notice here is that you don't have anything showing your oil pressure as of right now. In order to get oil pressure, you'd have to turn on our inverters. We'll do that here in a minute. Then we're going to do the other start first. So what I will tell you right now, if we were to take this here, go to off, we're still showing our 28 volts. But if we go to gen, we are now showing amps. The interesting thing about doing that is when you do it, your GPU automatically disconnects. Kind of nice. Normally you'd have to give a signal to the ground guy in order to get him to turn off the GPU and disconnect it, but they do it for you when you actually connect the generator to line. So there we go. And let's go ahead and start our left-hand side as well. Ticks again for the turbine speed. You can see here that our fan speed is also increasing. Waiting for light off. I think right around 40% the ignition's going to cut out. And when the ignition cuts out, the starter should cut off as well. We'll take a look at that. And it's going to be 40% right up here of the N2 speed. Let's watch it do its thing. Okay, so it's a little bit less than that. It's about 35%. So ignition's off, starter's off. You got a fire that's burning in there already, and it is maintaining itself. Fan speed is going to increase until you reach an idle of about 30% once again. Mid-50s on N2. There we go. So we'll go generator on here, and you're going to watch the generator load show up over here on the left-hand amps. There it is. If you want to check the voltage coming out from the left-hand generator and its ability to share the entire load, you can go off on the right-hand generator, and now you're seeing 28 volts here, and once again, a little bit more amps on the left-hand side. Now they're splitting that load evenly. Once again, like I said, you don't see oil pressure here because you don't have inverters. The same is going to be true for your attitude indicator. They're all going to be powered by the inverters. We'll get all of those as we work our way across the systems, though, so just in a couple seconds. Let's explain some stuff here as we work our way left to right. On the left-hand side, you have your audio control panel. If you want to listen to any of the nav radios, you would click the buttons here. If you have whichever one's up, that's the one you're going to be listening to. If you switch down here, this is what you're talking on, transmitting on, and it automatically selects number 2 when you swap it to number 2, back off if you go to number 1. Windshield heat right here, radome heat right here. This one here, if memory serves me right, is pneumatic. At least it was on the 60. It was hot bleed air that gets forced over the window. It's kind of like a defog system. Putting it all the way up opens the valve. Should make some extra noise to allow some airflow to go over that. Putting it to the hold position holds it exactly where it's at. Putting it to off will slowly close the valve, allowing it to turn itself off. I'm not sure how this windshield radome heat works. I don't believe we have that one on board our aircraft. Down here, sorry, static source, won't worry about that. Wing and stab heat, that's going to be right here. If you're flying in icy conditions, you're going to need those. NAC heat's right there. If you're flying in icy conditions, you're going to need those. Pitot heats are going to come on. Avionics master's coming on. Marker beacon, I'm going to leave that in low. Turn on the radio altimeter. Turn on the autopilot. Power to the autopilot system so that we can use it. Let's see here. None of those are going to be particularly important. Standby battery, I'll put it to the standby position. They're the emergency battery to standby. Fuel computers are on. Ignitions are off. Turn on the inverters, you'll hear the sound as they come online. And let's see, batteries are on, gens are on. Stall warning system's coming on. Hydraulic pump, I'll bring that on. Seatbelt sign, it's on. Let's talk real quick here about the rotary knob, rotary test panel. So that does work inside of the airplane here. If we were to move it up one, we're going to get the sound for the cabin high altitude. Move it up another one. That is the sound for the cabin over speed. Now, I haven't flown a Learjet in a decade now, so I'm not going to go through some of these over here. The trim monitor and the trim over speed, those are a little bit more fuzzy to me, so I'm not really going to go too crazy on that. If I was to zoom up here, right over here should be the Mach trim light. If I press it, you're going to get this Mach trim bell. There it is. And you get the overspeed warning with it. Fire detection should get us our master warning lights. There it is, along with your fire engine pull lights right there for the engine fire left, engine fire right at the top of the glare shield. Let's turn on the stick so you can see the left stall here. By pressing it, you can watch the left angle of attack go up. That's right here. And you activate it all the way until you see the stick shaker go crazy and start shaking. Right one does the exact same thing. Trim overspeed is going to change the rate at which the trim moves, if memory serves me right. And you can hear the little clacker as it goes, as it gets into its high-speed move. So that's all I thought it did, but not 100% sure on that. The light went off because I actually got it into the takeoff trim position. That's the reason that it's there. If you go to trim monitor, you do get a pitch trim light. However, I think that this has something to do with flaps. Let's try something. Trim monitor. Press it again. Yeah, I know that that was for the spoilerons. I don't think that this one here was what I was looking for. It's been a long time. I know that there's a way to test the spoilerons while you're flying. There's even a spoileron reset here. But I do not remember if that's the way it works. And you know what? I was thinking about spoilerons, so let's go ahead and talk about that real quick too. With the flaps in the full down position, what you'll notice here is if I was to increase our aileron here one way, let's go the other, you can see that inner spoileron coming up. It's there to increase the roll effectivity of the right hand wing in that case, and the left hand wing in the other case. It only works the flaps in that down position. Let's see if they work at flaps at the middle position, the 20. I don't think so, yeah. So it's full down. So essentially when you're in the landing configuration, they work to give you a little bit more roll control for the airplane. But anyway, I was really happy the fact that they worked in the way that they did. They showed up, unlike the last review I did of a business jet. These are actually set up to work pretty accurately. So we'll scroll that back around. I'll make sure my spoiler round's reset. Coming over here to this panel, this is your pressurization panel. It's very important. If you don't have it set up right, it will kill you in real life. Sadly, I believe Paint Stewart's crash was kind of blamed on this panel, and most likely a warning that wasn't working also. But let's explain this one here just a little bit. So if we were to, if we look at the panel itself, you basically have a group of knobs and switches here. So the left-hand side here, this is your cabin air. By clicking that on, it makes a sound. That is the bleed air coming into the cabin from the engine. So that's what that is. This is your cabin altitude controller. It's a manual control knob. Right here is actually the manual rate. It doesn't do anything that I've been able to notice in here, but that's what it is. By increasing this knob, the inner knob here shows the altitude at which the aircraft's going to be flying. 24,000 feet, 26,000 feet, 28,000 feet, and so on. If we go all the way up here towards, say, it's a 51,000 foot airplane. We came all the way up to 50,000 feet. You're going to run a cabin altitude of approximately 8,000 feet at max differential pressure. That's what that is. Now, when you're flying around, you are going to be able to control this knob here to control the rate at which the cabin is climbing or descending. It appears that inside of the game, like I said, if I grab this and move it, nothing changes, which makes me think it doesn't actually do anything in the game. But if you were to move this in real life, you're going to change this knob to move up or down on this dial to change the rate of climb or descent. And you want it to climb at something that people are going to be comfortable with, approximately 500 feet per minute, kind of at the high end. The other thing that you have to be careful for inside of these aircraft is they're incredibly high performance, and they will climb and descend at 6,000 feet per minute. You've got to make sure that the airplane's not going to be descending faster than the cabin's going to be able to reach its altitude that you want to be at. So while we set this altitude here based off of the inner knob for where we're going to be climbing to and what our max altitude is going to be, and today I think we're going to go up to about 28,000 feet if we have the time to make it there. So at 28,000 feet, we should have a cabin altitude just over 1,000 feet. Now, what I'll say here is if you have a super high rate of descent, you do run the risk of the cabin not being at your field elevation when you land, and then you're stuck trying to either wait for it or you're landing pressurized, both of which are bad. When you decide that you're going to land, you will actually set it based off of the outside dial. So the inside dial to set your cruising altitude. Once you make your initial descent, if I'm landing at Aspen, I'm going to scroll this bad boy right here up to something in the neighborhood of most likely around 7,000 feet. Can't remember the exact elevation of Aspen. I know that it's high, but it's not crazy high. It might be actually 6,500 feet, but somewhere in that area. And the cabin's going to continue to climb at that point until it reaches 7,000 feet, and you can verify where you're actually at for your altitude, for your cabin altitude right here. This is what you actually are at. This one here shows what you've actually selected, and this shows how it's getting there. The cabin would climb up so that you can land unpressurized when you get to Aspen. So like I said, I'm going to set this thing over here to about 28,000 feet. That's going to give us a cabin of about 1,000 feet, and then when we land in Kansas City, we'll be somewhere in the neighborhood of, it's about 750 feet, so we might have to scroll down a little bit and get a couple hundred feet per minute change on the cabin altitude. But that's how the panel works. Pretty straightforward. If I click to manual, will it even let me? No, it doesn't want to. So it looks like you're stuck in the auto mode only. All you can do is not turn it on, and then you'll pass out. Let's see what else we have over here. This is going to be cabin temperature controls. Not going to be needed. These are the light controls. And then it's a duplicate of the autopilot panel over there. As I said, I know I've flown the airplane for about 10 hours. It looks like the hobs reset when the game reset. There was an update that came through earlier today. And I guess when that happened, that's what you get. Other things that might be a little bit important here, you do have an emergency brake handle here. It is variable. You push it down, it'll slow you down. It does not have any type of anti-skid protection. You can blow your tires with it. Fuel jettisons here, it's hidden, but it's right there. And see here, this is going to be your cross flow control for balancing the wings and moving fuel from the fuselage tank forward. Fuel quantity is shown right here. This is the only instrumentation that you have for your fuel quantity. It shows total right there. Tip tank, wing for the right side. Fuselage tank, wing for the left side. Left tip tank. In order to see what you have total on board, you have to click it on this one. And if you turn off your jet pumps, the engine will shut down. Let's see here. Make sure my trim is set up. I'm going to actually pull it back ever so slightly. Somewhere to the back of this pitch pie here, that's your takeoff trim range. The airplane is kind of nose heavy in regular fashion, and as a result, it takes a little bit of nose up trim in order to get the airplane to take off and respond appropriately. Aileron trim can stay neutral. Rudder trim is going to stay neutral. I'll turn on my steering. And with all of that said and done, I do believe we got an airplane that is now ready to taxi and fly. Lower my seat just a little bit. I am going to set up an altitude here. Let's put in 5,000 feet. And let's talk real quick about, we'll talk about that as we start taxiing out. So brakes are off. See how much room we have. Not much. Give it just a touch of breakaway thrust. I do believe we'll be able to fit between the truck and the little guy on the tug. Make the hard turn. All right. So, the only things I wanted to talk about, let's go ahead and arm these thrust reversers. They're up there on the glare shield. We'll avoid the taxiway light that's in the middle of a taxiway. And continue our taxi out to the runway here. So we're going to be leaving off runway 35. I'll go ahead and set 35 in as our course for our heading. And we're going to go ahead and arm the heading mode. Look at our message here. It says that our course should be 163 degrees. So let's go ahead and scroll the course around to 163. That's a little bit too far. That's about right. And let's talk about our flight guidance controller for just a couple of seconds. As you can tell, my heading showed up when I clicked the button here. I'll turn it off again. That flight director, the little yellow flight director that drops in here, that's going to correspond to whatever we have set in here for our heading. That's what our heading mode is. The way this thing is organized, and it's pretty clear, roll controls here, pitch controls are over here. This does not have the same type of controls, though, that you expect from any of the more modern avionics. So instead of you having a knob up here where you're able to actually make changes to what your climb rate is, what your descent rate is, it's going to be using basic information from our standard six-pack. So your heading's going to be done right there. Your course is going to be set up right here. And as long as the needle's in the middle, it's going to follow it. It doesn't really care whether it's left or right or anywhere else. It's just going to follow the needle and keep it in the middle. Vertical speed is going to be set up based off your VSI. I have not been able to actually get my speed mode to capture, but it would work in the exact same way as a pitch mode or the vertical speed mode, just basing it off of your your airspeed indicator. Altitude select does work, altitude hold will work. And on the left-hand side, your half bank can be turned on or off. It just limits the amount of bank you're going to have from your flight director. We will be using the nav mode as we go. Back course is for back course ILS, and level is simply a wings leveler. So it's a very simple autopilot system. It'll work pretty well. It's just a matter of it's not overly complicated. All right, I think I've talked enough. Let's go flying. And make sure everything's good. We've got two good engines. Flaps are set. I've turned off all the traffic, so there shouldn't be anyone out here flying around, but let's take a peek anyway. And let's get ourselves out here and take off. Annunciator panel looks clear. So, one thing that I will mention here, the Learjet has a 200 knot limitation for the main landing gear. For retraction and extension, it's a VLO, or landing gear operating speed. So we'll have to keep that in mind and make sure that we are not exceeding it. And it also has a 200 knot limitation on the flaps. So it's not uncommon in the Lear to be having a power reduction almost immediately after takeoff. All right, airspeed's alive. There's 80 knots. At about 130, we'll start adding some back pressure. Give it a little bit more. We're going to have to pull it off the runway a little bit. All right, she's flying. Gear's coming up. flaps are coming up. All right, gear and flaps are up. Let's start making that left-hand turn. We'll just pitch it for about... I'm working on the trim right now. I'm going to start making a left-hand turn as we come around. We're going to pitch it for somewhere around 200 knots for a couple of seconds. Altitude select is armed. And we're going to spin that heading bug around while I fly with my other hand. And we're going to come right through the course. We're going to bring it all the way around to there. All right, so we're coming up on 4,000 feet for 5,000 feet. You will receive the altitude alerter sound even if you don't have out select arm. However, the flight director will not follow the altitude select if you don't have altitude select arm. So now we've got alts cap showing up on the altitude select knob with the little green arrow. And if you look just right at that, now we have alt hold on because it has captured the altitude. Also, I'm trimming kind of like crazy here in order to try to make the airplane fly somewhat smooth. We'll go ahead and set up 28,000 feet now. We're going to click out select again. That's going to disengage our out hold. At least it should have. It didn't. All right, there we go. And I'm going to pitch sync, add the power back in, and we're going to pitch the airplane for 250 knots. And it's going to take quite a bit of pitch. But take a look at that vertical speed down here. Right now, we're a little over 6,000 feet per minute. Airspeed seems to be holding pretty steady, so we're about 15 degrees nose up. I think that heading's going to work pretty well for our intercept. I'm going to engage the nav mode, and I'm going to bring the heading back to center up to right where I'm at. Course is coming back in already. We're maintaining something in the neighborhood of about 240 knots, so a little bit too high. Lower that nose ever so slightly. And as we come through 10, at some point here, I'll display the autopilot system a little bit too. All right, looks like nav's captured up. I'm going to start leading the turn because the flight director in this airplane does seem to lag ever so slightly. And it'll put you in a situation where you're kind of behind it. Now, something I remember from our Learjets, when we came out at 10,000 feet, the immediate thing we would do would be to accelerate the airplane towards about 340 knots. The airplane just climbs really, really well if you're fast. If you're slow like this, and it's funny, I mean, slow is relative, right? But if you're at 250 knots, it seems like it can be kind of a pig. So I'm just going to go ahead, I'm pushing the trim down a little bit. I'm lowering the nose. I'm resyncing the pitch. Let's let the airplane accelerate. She's got excess power. And then we'll initiate a climb at about 300 knots, and we'll control that via pitch as well. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and engage our autopilot. And we're at about 300 there. Let's let it go just a little bit more. Go ahead and close that so I don't see it right now. All right, so I'm going to pull back ever so slightly on my... We are in an autopilot pitch mode right now, so I'm going to pull back a little bit on the stick. You can see the joystick moving there, the yoke. And when I do, I'm going to hold down my pitch sync button, which is going to treat it very similarly, like I said, to a touch control steering, which is an ability to essentially fly the flight director to where you want it. When you release it, it's going to stabilize it and keep it right there. So right now, our airspeed's decreasing ever so slightly. We're still showing a 7,000 foot per minute climb. And we're on course, about to come through 18,000 feet. All right, we're already 2992s, but we're through 18,000 feet. And we're 17 miles away from the waypoint. We're just going to climb up to about 28,000 feet, and then we're going to start that descent to get back in, because guess what? The runway's going to be insanely close. Actually, I guess we're going up to MCI first, and then we're going to jump over to Kansas City Downtown Airport via the ILS runway 19 there. I didn't mention it. Let's hide the yoke real quick. But right here, underneath your HSI, you have the ability to swap between VOR navigation and GPS, or as this says, FMS navigation. But I wouldn't call a GNS 530 to really be an FMS. Either way, that's where it is. That's where your switch is. I've let the airplane get too slow for my personal taste. I want it to be going faster. But yeah, she's I will say the performance of these aircraft is insane. I should have tried to do a time to climb on that. Unrestricted climbs in a Learjet are absolutely amazing. I will say also, while I've tested the airplane out, and we're not going to go there today, I have flown the thing up to 51,000 feet. It will do it. Kind of like the real airplane, it can be kind of difficult to get it there. Mid-40s, it's very happy. Once you get up to about 47, it starts getting a little bit questionable. But it will do. It's a 51,000 foot airplane, and if it's light, it'll still do it. So it'll do it in the sim here as well. And I think that was accurate, and it's kind of cool. So we'll say that about this and every other Learjet. They're neat airplanes to fly. Here in the center, it also has a weather radar. If I click the button, it should turn on. Let's see. Yeah, there's your range controller. The elevation does not change. 1,000 feet to go. We do have altitude select armed. Just verify that it actually captures. And then we'll reset that altitude to something lower. Let's see what that course is supposed to be now. Oh, we're already in the smart turn. Direct track's going to be 070. Move the course around. There we go. And we have captured. I'm going to go ahead and reset my altitude to, let's see, the first fix here, core V, is going to be down at 3,000 feet. It's going to be a very quick descent. How far away are we? 8 miles. That should be tough. Let's try it out. Nav's armed, nav is captured. I'm going to go ahead and pull my power out. Altitude select. I'm going to go ahead and extend my air brakes if I can actually ever click it. Come here. Spoilers are out. Power's coming out. Nose is coming down. We're just going to pitch it. And we are going to let this airplane accelerate and descend, hopefully quickly. As you can tell, the course came right through. Truthfully, not even really surprising. It's just kind of the way it works for this airplane. The roll attitude appears to be kind of low. So if I had any other complaint, and honestly, it might be very realistic, as in the airplane takes a while to adjust itself to remain on a course. Even though it's attempting to do smart turns, etc., it just takes a bit. Looks like we do have the hold, one turn to the hold. Hold parallel, yep. So that's already in there. We'll see if this actually comes in and does anything properly. But the hold's a 192 degree inbound. I'm going to throw in the inbound course. 192. Coming through 16,000 feet. And, yeah. We'll see if we can get ourselves turned back around here on the course and close to 3,000 feet before it becomes problematic. We have altitude to lose, and one of the cool things about Learjets is with the spoilers open, they do lose altitude incredibly fast. I mean, we're coming down to 10,000 feet a minute right now, and only about 270 knots. So it would be terribly uncomfortable if you were a passenger. But to come down at this type of rate of descent without being right at the barber pole of 300 and 340, 350 knots is really impressive. Go ahead and set that to about 700 feet. And as you can tell, here's that cabin rate, and it shows a 500 foot per minute descent. And like I said, I can't actually make a change with that. Let's see if this thing actually attempts to do the hold. I don't know if it's going to or not. That will be something to see. Now, it's showing it. We'll see if it comes back around and tries to do this teardrop entry. I'm going to go ahead and lessen this descent rate up because there's no reason to be screaming down nearly this fast. And we'll talk about one other thing that's kind of important when it comes to Learjets. 1,000 feet to go. So, we talked about the 250 knot limit, or the 200 knot limit on the airplane. Make sure, okay, alt's cap is already happening. That's good. We already talked about the 200 knot limit on the gear and the flaps. For the first notch of flaps and first notch of gear, I can probably cruise around right now at 250 knots without too much worry or trouble, because there'll be plenty of time to still slow down. However, it can be very difficult to get the airplane to slow down without using those spoilers if you are not kind of careful about managing your speed as you approach your final approach fix. If you're hauling in at 250 knots and you don't want to use spoilers because you would quote unquote annoy your passengers, Learjets are just kind of notorious to get below a speed where you can actually get any type of drag out there to help slow the airplane down. And they are relatively slick airplanes, so they just don't slow down all that well. All right, here's that left-hand turn coming back around to intercept that final approach course. We're going to swap over our nav source and shoot this approach. So our frequency is going to be 109.9, which is right there. I'm going to go ahead and swap that up to the primary. That's IMKC. That is confirmed. Once we come back around and we establish ourselves inbound, I'll swap that over, and then we'll be flying that 192-degree radial or course down to a decision altitude of about 1,000 feet. Not worried about it. It's clear VFR. It's a beautiful day out here, but that's what we're going to do. Touchdown zone is going to be about 700 feet, and yeah, should be nice and easy. World's most famous last words. It'll be nice and easy. And to make sure that it actually is, I'm going to go ahead and start turning the airplane. Whoa, that was accidental. I swear it feels like the half bank's on this thing because it's not giving me a 30-degree bank turn. Come back over there, grab that localizer, and then swap the nav source over. Let's take our heading back around. Something in that range. But yeah, it's actually, this has been a really great flying airplane in the sim. I'm immensely happy with it. Spoilers, I thought I closed you guys already. Spoilers are closed. Just had a spoiler light kick on for a second up there. And now I'm sitting here wondering why my spoiler light came on. Get back up to 3,000 feet, so have to start looking away from things. And in case you missed it, we're hand flying. All right, let's go ahead. Let's unarm that. I'm going to swap this to the localizer. And let's look over here. I'm going to arm the glide slope. Now we've got nav, glide slope armed. Let's just wait for that localizer needle to start working its way in. And you do have good representation of it both up here on your attitude indicator and down on your regular mechanical HSI. All right, there's the course. It's just coming alive. We'll just follow those flight directors right around. Maintain 3,000 feet. It looks like the final approach fix is going to be at 2,600 feet. If we stay here at 3,000, there's no altitudes that are mandatory. We can actually grab the glide slope while we're out here and just work our way all the way in. 192-degree course already set. And before we get to Zagda, we'll start slowing the airplane down And we might actually want to do it once that glide slope really kind of starts moving in itself, because if we don't, we run the risk of it being difficult to once again slow the airplane down. But I'll gauge that as we go. Great flying airplane. Good looking airplane. Just fun to be flying something analog like this, and I hope that we have some more analog business jets that kind of come on the market. I think I heard rumors that we might have a Hawker 800, but that would most likely be a Proline 21 Hawker 800 XP or a 850. So if that's the case, that won't have the same deal, but I would love to try it because it is an airplane that I used to fly quite a bit too. And I also heard that there might be a Sabreliner in works, which would be a lot of fun. I haven't flown it. I have a buddy that has, and I'd love to give that one a go as well. But this thing here has just been, it's fun to fly around in. All right, looks like the glide slope's finally actually moving. Start pulling the power back. Got 1 dot, waiting on 200 knots before we can actually start putting in any flaps. Getting close though. All right, there is our glide slope captured. If for some reason we have to go missed approach here, we're going to end up going to about 4,000 feet, it looks like. And I say about with a bit of a joke, because we will be climbing to 4,000 feet if we had to go missed. On the glide, we're below 200 knots. Let's go ahead and get first degree of flaps in. First 8 are set up. We'll go flaps to, I believe it was 20. And let's go. You're down. All right, we're showing 3 green. A little bit low on that glide slope. Get that nose up ever so slightly. Below 150 knots, we'll be able to get our last 10 degrees of flaps in. Little low. You can see the runway out there. I will say that something that I love flying on this airplane here is the way the flap motions are translated to the flight controls. Unlike the, the Caravan, where any type of movement of the flaps creates a drastic pitch attitude change. This airplane's significantly more realistic. You add in some flaps, yes, there's going to be a little bit of a pitching moment, but it doesn't do anything near what it does inside of some of the other aircraft in the game. So this thing here works really well. Seems very realistic. We got the JIPWIZ warning there, as if the database is very old and not exactly intelligent, which it wouldn't have been in this type of airframe. Just try to keep her on the glide slope coming down. A little bit high now. And now we're about a dot off. We're visual for the landing. Runway is clear. Power's very gradually coming out. Start increasing the pitch attitude a little bit for the round out. A little bit more. All right. And thrust reversers should be deployed. And they're coming back towards idle. I'll leave the TRs open for a minute. And with your right hand, if you were flying the real airplane, you'd reach down really quickly, hit that steering engagement button, the steering lock. I can't hit it from here, so I am going to look down real quick, click the button, look back up. And I think there's a taxiway right there. Yep, that's where I'm going. And with that, we're essentially done and on the ground in Kansas City. So that kind of concludes it. Like I said, if I had to say what I think of this particular title from Flysimware, truthfully, I think they kind of nailed it. You get the experience of flying a legacy, old school, analog business jet. There's more than enough system functionality to keep you entertained. You have the checklist in order to keep things accurate for the type of flying if you want to have accurate flight operations. The modeling of the airplane is gorgeous. You've got multiple liveries that show up, to include some that are kind of whimsical and others that are a little bit more business straightforward and simple. It's just a very well done, well executed aircraft. It just really is. I mean, there's no other ways around it. So put it in the comments. Tell me what you guys all think. I'm definitely curious to know. And, you know, hopefully you guys are having fun and enjoying the game. And it's treating you guys well. And for any of you out there flying, please, like I said, put it in the comments. If you have anything you'd like for me to take a peek at, please put that in the comments as well. I'd love to do so at my convenience, and hopefully everyone liked the video. So all my Flight Sim community folks, thank you for watching. Take care, happy simming, and we'll catch you next time around.